Welcome to the new package History of Hutch, where we talk all things the first 20 years of the history of Hutchinson High School. Today we're talking homecoming. Yes, homecoming, where we march shopping carts through the hallways of Hutchinson High School. Why shopping carts, you might ask? Well, let's get to it. So we decided we wanted to do homecoming, and we decided we had to have a level playing field. A student council member happened to have a dad that works at Fred Meyer's and said we could just use their shopping carts. Well, we kind of fully intended to call said dad and say, can we borrow some shopping carts? But things got a little bit tight, so we may have just gone over and may have just procured a few shopping carts from Fred Meyer's. Dad didn't care. He said, just make sure that you return them afterwards. The problem was we didn't properly explain that to everyone at the float building parties, so pretty much every single cluster spray painted, somehow damaged, or ruined those said shopping carts. So long story short, Fred Meyer's decided just to donate those shopping carts to us. Now to the fun part. The float building has become absolutely crazy over the history of Hutch. The first years it was just a shopping cart wrapped in simple paper. Now it's become massive Trojan horses that the head literally had to be removed each time it went through a doorway. The Arts AV cluster built a huge battleship that barely was able to turn the corners of Hutchinson High School. The health cluster built this side float that had 11-foot orca whale made out of paper mache, and they didn't stop there. They built 2 baby side floats, all of it ending in an amazing shopping cart trophy, complete with Barbie cart shopping cart spray painted gold that may or may not have been stolen from Mr. Johnson's daughter. All of it to say, Hutchinson High School's homecoming parade is one of a kind, and it's truly a part of the history of Hutch.
Today we're talking 3 quirky things of the history of Hutch. Do you know that back in the early 2000s, Hutchinson High School had a blacklight dance as their back-to-school dance, and at one point they actually called it Black-to-School Dance? Not necessarily a good look for current times. Second quirky thing about Hutchinson dances is they were oftentimes DJ'd by the mayor of the city, Jim Matherly. The Matherly boys, all 5 of them, went to Hutchinson High School, and so DJ Matherly, who later became Mayor Matherly, was an obvious choice for DJ. But probably one of the most unique or quirky things about Hutchinson dances is how we elect our homecoming king and queen. Whereas most schools do it by popularity vote, Hutchinson High School's first homecoming dance, the planner, myself, Mr. Ben Johnson, did not exactly think about homecoming queen and king. So it wasn't until about halfway through the dance that we said, oh my gosh, how are we going to decide who is going to be king and queen? Well, the obvious solution was a dance-off. It was such a huge hit. Rather than having some kind of popular voting, we get all the students on the floor, we tap out all the students that aren't dancing so well, and then a final circle up and dance off, and a crowd-selected cheering king and queen are later crowned. Short note, since it matters for this year, Layla Murdoch was the first female freshman homecoming queen of all time. And that's all just part of the history of Hutch. Today on the History of Hutch, we take a look at the top 3 quirky historical facts about our 20-year-old building. Have you ever noticed how some of the classrooms at Hutch are kind of long rectangles rather than a common square? Well, that is because the original blueprints for the new building forgot to include space for a gym. That's right, where the gym sits originally was going to be all classrooms. When the redraw was done, suddenly they needed to find space for all the rooms, and thus many of the large square classrooms were suddenly subdivided into the smaller rectangles you see today. Of course, if they didn't plan for a gym, they certainly didn't plan for a weight room. So take a look at the 3 pictures on screen and guess where the weight room has been. Well, if you guessed all 3 of these crazy locations, you would be right. The weight room started as a weight closet in the back of the gym, was eventually moved to what is now the lab space for health occupation. When Mr. Ben Johnson's wife, Jeanette Johnson, took over the health occupation program, she was mad about not having a lab space, so they moved the weight room next to the conference room. It wasn't a very good look for the school having a sweaty, smelly gym being the first thing you saw when you're entering the school, so once the back distance delivery classroom became available, opportunistic Mr. Steve Shannon jumped all over it and gave us the amazing weight room that we have today. The final quirky room space for the history of Hutch is the oddly small sinks and bathrooms in the back wing science and sped classrooms. Ever wonder why the sinks in there are toddler height? Well, that is because they were designed to be used by toddlers. These rooms were technically not a part of Hutchinson High School, but rather part of the district's Teen Options program. This is a program where teenagers from across the district could come if they became pregnant, and the bonus kitchen, the tiny bathrooms, and the two-way mirror windows would allow these young girls, and the one male that came over time, to have daycare for their children while they attended classes. Often, these were regular Hutchinson classes. The girls in the program, though not officially Hutch students, were allowed to participate in all Hutch activities, included dances and sports, and before you ask it, yes, we briefly did have a visually pregnant student running up and down the court on our girls' basketball team. Online classes and other options made the Teen Options program fade away, but the sink stayed, and that is just another part of the quirky history of Hutch. On today's History of Hutch, we're talking all things assembly. Hutch has some of the craziest assemblies in the entire state. I've been to many assemblies from other schools, and I can tell you, nobody does it quite like Hutch. So today we're going to cover the 5 really memorable things from Hutchinson High School's assemblies. Starting off, one of our favorite games, the Blue Mat Crowd Surfing game. No game empties the bleachers quite like this game. Everybody down, rolling and pushing that blue mat. It's a ton of fun to watch and always an exciting event. One of the memorable games from our boys versus girls assemblies was back when we did the jockstrap launch game. Yes, we used to have boys versus girls assemblies around Valentine's Day, and as we were playing boys versus girls, we thought what better way to launch these eggs across the gym floor than launch them out of a jockstrap and a sports bra. If you're ever in the student council equipment closet and see a random jockstrap and sports bra sitting around, you now know why Miss Patton was not too pleased with that game. Also from the Boys vs. Girls Assembly, a very memorable event was our last tug of war. It was a last because the rope broke. Who knew? 400 students pulling on either ends of a super heavy industrial grade rope. It snapped right in the middle, sending basically everyone to the floor. 2 really kind of memorable messy games that we've had. The first was foot face painting. They were supposed to use a brush and hold it between their toes to paint their partner's face, but one student decided instead it was going to be faster to just dip his disgusting foot in the thing of paint and then smear his foot all over his friend's face. They won the points, but why was it worth it? I don't know. But probably the all-time weirdest and grossest game that I can think in the history of Hutch was the gum tower game. We threw bubble gum up to everyone in the stands who all chewed it. Later, we sent around a turkey tray that every student spit their gum out into that turkey tray and then pass it down to the one poor contestant at the bottom. And the game was to build a tower out of everybody's spit-covered gum, and the tallest tower win. I can tell you the smell still haunts me to this day. So that is the history of Hutch, the top 5 assembly games.